Everyone knows how the 300 Spartans died at Thermopylae. But here is the truth you haven't been told. Their grand sacrifice was actually a massive tactical failure that left Athens wide open to burn. Greece didn't win this war with shields on land. They won it with a dirty secret weapon at sea. Here is exactly how it happened. By the end of this video, you'll see ancient history in a totally new way. You'll know how a desperate nation beat the biggest empire on Earth when everything seemed lost. We're going to fix the biggest myth about the birth of Western freedom. I've spent years tracking down the real stories behind these ancient battles, separating the facts from the fairy tales. Think of it this way. The movies love to show guys in leather capes yelling on a hill, but the real war was won by sweaty guys crammed into wooden boats. The Persian king Xerxes had a massive fleet. He had over 1,000 warships. The Greeks had just a fraction of that number. If the Greeks lost at sea, the Western world would look completely different today. There would be no democracy, no free speech, and no modern science. The stakes couldn't have been higher. But the Greeks had a secret leader who didn't play by the rules. His name was Themistocles. He wasn't a noble hero. He was a lying, cheating politician, and he was exactly what Greece needed to survive. Let's dive directly into the real, brutal, and untold story of this epic war. Let's start with the man who built the fleet. Themistocles was 45 years old. He didn't come from the rich, fancy families of Athens. He was a street fighter in the arena of politics. He didn't know how to play music or write poetry. He openly bragged that he only knew how to take a small, nameless city and turn it into something great. Years before the Persians arrived, he saw the storm coming. He knew Athens needed ships. He convinced the city to build 200 massive warships called triremes. That took 40,000 men to pull the oars. It was a massive gamble. Now, why does this matter? Because Athens had recently become a democracy. Slaves didn't fight well for masters, but free men fought hard for their own land. Themistocles tapped into that raw energy. But before he could unleash his fleet, he messed up. His first big plan was a total disaster. He led 10,000 men north to hold a mountain pass called the Vale of Tempe. He wanted to block the Persian army right there, but when he arrived, he found out he missed 2 other trails nearby. The enemy could easily walk right around him. It was a terrible failure of intelligence. He had to pack up and run away. But it gets worse. The Persian king Xerxes was marching south with an unstoppable army. At the same time, a massive Persian fleet was sailing down the coast. Xerxes wanted revenge. Years earlier, Athens had burned a Persian city. Then the Greeks crushed a Persian army at the Battle of Marathon. Xerxes was here to burn Greece to the ground. Themistocles needed a new plan fast. He chose a place called Artemisium. It was a beautiful cove with sandy beaches and pine trees. But in August, it became a hot, stinking war zone. Artemisium was the perfect choke point. The Greek fleet could park there and stop the Persian ships from helping their army on land. Here is the catch. The numbers were terrifying. The Greeks had about 280 ships. The Persians had over 1,200. It was a floating Tower of Babel. The Persian fleet had men from Egypt, Phoenicia, Cyprus, and even trader Greeks. They spoke dozens of languages. They didn't even have a single Persian rowing the boats. But the Greeks had salt water in their veins. Still, they were led by Sparta. Sparta was a land power, but they demanded to lead the navy anyway. Themistocles let them take the credit because he just wanted to win the war. The very first clash went horribly wrong for the Greeks. They sent 3 scout ships north. The Persian fleet spotted them. The Greek crews panicked. 2 ships were captured and 1 was run aground. The Persians took the best-looking Greek marine from the wreckage. They hauled him to the front of their ship and slit his throat for good luck. The Greeks at Artemisium saw the bad news via fire signals across the mountaintops. They panicked and rowed away to hide. It looked like the war was over before it even started. But then nature stepped in. The Persian fleet was so big they couldn't fit into any harbor. They had to park their ships in 8 long lines out in the open sea. A massive 3-day storm hit them hard. The waves smashed their wooden hulls against the rocks. When the sun came up, the coast was covered in gold cups, treasure chests, and dead bodies. The Persians lost 400 ships in a single weekend. When the Greeks heard the news, they thanked the gods and raced back to Artemisium. But when they arrived, they saw the Persian fleet was still twice their size. The Greeks wanted to run away again. The local people of the island were terrified. They begged the Greeks to stay so they could evacuate their families. Themistocles saw an opportunity. He took a massive bribe of 30 talents of silver from the locals. He kept most of it for himself, gave some to the Spartan commander, and convinced the fleet to stay and fight. Then, a stroke of pure luck happened. 15 Persian ships got lost in the dark. They mistook the Greek camp for their own. They sailed right into the trap. The Greeks captured all 15 ships and took 3 high-ranking Persian leaders prisoner. The main Persian fleet at the harbor of Aphetai decided to end the war with a trick. They sent 200 ships on a long trip around the island to cut off the Greek retreat. But a famous Greek diver named Silius swam across the channel to warn Themistocles. Themistocles didn't wait to get trapped. He decided to attack the main Persian fleet in the late afternoon. It was a crazy idea. The Persians had more ships and faster boats. When the Persians saw the tiny Greek fleet coming, they thought the Greeks had lost their minds. They raced out to surround them. Think of it this way. Themistocles wanted to be surrounded. It was all part of his plan. He waited until late in the day because ancient navies couldn't fight in the dark. He knew the battle would be short. He just wanted to test a deadly new move. The Persians were famous for a move called the diekplus. They would row fast through gaps in the enemy line, turn around, and smash the sides of the opponent's ships. They would also pull in their oars at the last second to shear off the enemy's oars and leave them helpless. When the Persians surrounded the Greek trumpets blew. At the signal, the Greek ships formed a perfect defensive circle, like the spokes of a wheel. Their prows faced out, and their sterns were packed tight together. The Persians couldn't break through. Then came the counterpunch. The Greek ships darted out of the circle. They rammed the loose Persian boats and smashed their oars. In just a few minutes of chaos, the Greeks captured 30 enemy ships. They proved that their heavy, slow boats could destroy the fast Persian fleet in tight spaces. That night, another massive summer storm hit. Dead bodies and broken wood floated into the Persian camp. The storm also completely wrecked the 200 Persian ships that were trying to sail around the island. They were all smashed against the cliffs. There was no escape trap left. The next day, the Greeks attacked again in the late afternoon. They targeted a squadron from Cilicia and destroyed it. The Persians were getting desperate and terrified of what their king would do to them if they lost. On the third day, the Persians didn't wait. They launched a massive attack at midday. They formed a giant crescent shape to trap the Greeks against the shore. The battle was pure chaos. The Persian fleet was too big for the narrow channel. Their ships began colliding with each other, smashing their own oars and breaking their hulls. The fighting was brutal. The rowers on the lowest levels couldn't see anything. They just sat in the dark, smelling sweat, pitch, and sheep tallow, listening to the terrifying crunch of iron rams breaking through wood. The battle lasted until nightfall. It ended in a bloody draw. Both sides lost dozens of ships and thousands of men. Half of the Athenian fleet was badly damaged. But strategically, it was a massive victory for the Greeks. They had held the line against the greatest army on earth. Then, the worst possible news arrived on the beach. A runner came from the mountain pass of Thermopylae. The 300 Spartans were dead. The Persian army had broken through the defenses and was now marching straight toward Athens. There was nothing left to stop them. The Greek navy had to leave Artemisium immediately. They needed to get back south to save their families. They packed up their ships in the middle of the night. But before Themistocles rode away, he had one last trick up his sleeve. He took his fastest ships to the local water springs where the Persian sailors would stop the next day. He used rocks and paint to leave massive messages on the walls. The messages told the Ionian Greeks fighting for Persia to stop fighting their own blood. He told them to desert or fight badly on purpose. Themistocles knew exactly what he was doing. Even if the Ionians didn't desert, the Persian king would find the notes and stop trusting his best sailors. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The stone foundation of freedom had been set. Now you know the real story. The 300 Spartans didn't save Greece, but a cunning rogue at sea did. If you want to see how this brilliant sea trap finally closed on the Persian king at Salamis, watch this next video right here. It details the bloodiest day in naval history. Click it right now, and I'll see you there.